So the first part of this is this term called CSR. So what's that stand for? You're gonna see this. I just said it basically. Nobody's awake yet this morning. No coffee. Corporate social responsibility. So, what do you think that corporate? What does that mean? Corporate social responsibility. Corporate communicates to people. That's one. That's definitely an aspect of it. What else do you think it is? Okay. The key words in that first, in that middle word, okay? Social or society, okay? Corporate social responsibility is this theory that has risen, come about over the last probably 15 years, where a corporate, if you go back to how is a corporation structured? What is a corporation? What's a corporation? What's that? A business, okay. Well, how does that differ than, say, the House of Pizza over here? Because I'm going to assume that's probably owned by one person. Okay, so a corporation really is an entity that is a business that is formed. Once it's formed, and we'll get into the more specifics of those later, as a legal entity. But what it is basically it becomes its own being at that point. Okay, the House of Pizza over here, which is probably owned by one person, is owned by a sole owner. What happens to that business if it dies? If he dies? It goes under or closes probably. It's probably not going to continue, right? What happens to a company if the CEO dies or the founder dies? Did Apple stop after Steve Jobs left or passed away? No, it's still going, right? It has a life of its own. So this aspect of how a company being a being and how it relates to society, it came about 15 years ago, okay? Before that, there wasn't very much paid about how a company functions as a individual entity within society, okay? So now this aspect has come about of, okay, there's society, a company being a part of society, in some of these cases, such as Apple and Microsoft, and some of these Nike, some of these are pretty huge companies, right? Do they have a responsibility to the society? Do they owe anything to the society as a whole? So they can just make shoes and keep going, and they don't have any impact. They shouldn't have any impact on what happens in society. Nobody's seen a Nike commercial. I like to refer to Nike because they're big into it. They were one of the first that was into this aspect of corporate social responsibility. What's the take on their commercials, guys? How many of them have seen a Nike commercial? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, so what are they about? Are they really about selling shoes or clothing?
They really want to make an impact.
Okay, they want to make an impact to what?
On society and like for athletes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, they're encouraging you to do something that is to better society. Okay, that's that aspect of corporate social responsibility. And the reason why I referred to Nike is because they were probably one of the very first ones who went down this road. Okay, because it was ingrained in them pretty much from when they started Nike. Okay, as one of those companies. Now, since then, over the last 15 years, it's become more and more a mandate of society that companies do something to give back to the society. Okay? If they don't, what do you think happens in this day of instant press and instant everything, on the internet? Do you think that the company is viewed very well if they don't react to that? No, right? They're not. They're definitely not. Okay. And there's been a lot of pressure for companies to come up with these corporate social responsibility statements, okay? Now, there's a couple of companies out there, and I've chosen a couple that we're going to take a look at here in the way they handle this, okay? Okay, so the first one I'm going to look at is Starbucks. And Starbucks, much like Nike, kind of always had this in the way they were looking at this, okay? They continued to look at this all the way through since their inception. It was part of it ties back to their mission statement, okay? And it's been revised a couple of times, and basically it says to make an impact through coffee. Their mission statement of Starbucks is to make an impact through coffee in the entire world, one neighborhood at a time, okay? So what they've done is they went in and incorporated and rolled this into what they do, much like Nike does, okay? So, you know, what they're actually looking at doing, and this is right off of their webpage, okay? Which is, this is how they're making an impact to society. Which links back to that mission statement, right? Make an impact in the world through coffee, one cup at a time type of thing, okay? You know, they're making an impact in society in these ways, okay? They're looking at, first one is obviously sourcing things ethically and sustainably, okay? Why is that important? Why would Starbucks identify with that as being something that they need to give back to? Who cares where you get your coffee from? Anybody? Okay. You care if they buy that coffee and they're paying those people who are pick that coffee, you know, 10 cents an hour. Do you care about that? Okay, it's brutal, but it happens in a lot of places in the world. Okay, but it's brutal. So do you as the person who's purchasing that product, does that matter to you? I can tell you Starbucks has done a lot of research. It matters to the consumer. Okay, whether it matters to the group in this room or not. Okay, they've done plenty of research to understand that that's something that's extremely important to their customer base. Okay, and the fact that it's sustainable, okay? Again, it is very important to their customer base. Both of those aspects of where the product comes from and how they get it is extremely important to what their customer base is. You know, the aspect of leading in green retail, okay? If anybody doesn't know what that means, is that most everything in Starbucks is either made from reclaimed material, recycled material, or it's all compostable. Okay, you know, everything from their cups right down to everything they do. I mean, most of the time they give away the grounds to people so that way they can use them in their gardens. Okay, so they are really leading about that green retail. Okay, about reducing waste and those types of things. Okay, creating opportunities and strengthening communities. Those are kind of self-evident, but they've decided that these are important. Now, by contrast, we're going to take a look at Amazon. Okay. Now, I can tell you that Amazon has not been a leader in this category. Okay. Not till recently when they really enforced it. Their current situation really has pushed them into doing things a different way. Okay. They did not start out with, so why the difference? Why do you think Amazon didn't start out doing that? What was Amazon's primary purpose? What's their business, guys? What does Amazon do? They're a middleman, right? They're a shipper, okay? Absolutely. They're a way of bringing products into the marketplace. But what's their key line? they can do it better and cheaper than anybody else, right? Okay. Everybody in here probably uses Amazon, right? Okay. There isn't anybody out here that probably doesn't use Amazon because they can get it to you quicker, cheaper than anybody else in the marketplace. Do you think that that screams a responsibility for society? Okay, you say yes. Okay, who says yes? Okay. Who says no? Okay, I'll say no. Okay. The rest of you guys that abstain. Okay, the reason why is typically, what is that in business? Quick, better, quicker, faster. Advantage, what is that? That's efficiency, right? Does that necessarily mean effective? We go back to that first part of the week, right? First part of the classes, right? Is that effective? It can be, but realistically, there's no human element in there to be effective, okay? Their whole focus, generally, at first, was to get everything out quicker, faster, okay? That is, the evolution went through here, and if you look at Amazon, they went through a couple of different phases. They went through, the first phase was getting up and running and really realizing that they could make this really super effective, okay, and really get everything out there. Then they had to realize they grew so quickly, they ran into a period of time where they couldn't find employees. So then what they did is they looked inward, okay, and that's where they've decided to set as one of their goals to become one of the best employers in the country, okay. They started offering a lot of incentives for their employees. They paid for school. They didn't care if you stayed or you didn't. Even for part-time work, they stayed in there. Okay. They did a lot of those types of things. So those are types of things that they would start to move into. And then really lately, they've had to take a step back and really look at what their social impact is, especially with they were in this unique position when our current position happened, right? Okay, a lot of it is because they almost doubled they increased their business by 30 or 40%. Okay, just because nobody wanted to go shopping out anymore. Okay, but at the same time, on the other side, what was happening? Anybody follow the current events through the business news or any of those types of things? They took so much heat for the fact that they didn't react quick enough to this situation internally and externally. You know, they had plants, shipping places where certain facilities were on strike. Okay, they took a lot of heat for not jumping on the bandwagon quick enough to protect their employees. Okay, which in turn society just revolted. Okay, basically you can't do that, blah blah. You're forcing them to work. Well, they were considered to be essential workers, right? To get products out to the economy. So they were very slow, though, in reacting to how they could actually make this better. Thus, now they poured a ton of marketing information in as they're making, and they're spending, I think it's $4 billion to upgrade the safety of their plants. And they're pushing that dollar amount out into the media because corporate social responsibility was not super in their forefront, right? But public pressure forced them to change their thinking, okay, and really started to push that. Again, it's about society and how they treat those companies. I guarantee and this has taken almost the effect, at least in my opinion, CSR has taken this effect of replacing, not entirely, but a lot of it, the labor union market, okay? So if you follow a business and we go back into, we talk about the historical looking at things, what really changed some of those impacts historically going back in there would have been labor unions in the meatpacking industry and manufacturing and those areas where labor unions got their start, right? The auto workers union. Those types of things really had an impact, okay? And then when business got good, things weren't so great. Labor unions fall out of favor, right? When there's there's a lot of jobs around and a lot of things availability, labor unions aren't quite as effective. And this is where this corporate social aspect of corporate social responsibility is taking its effect. It's almost taking its replacement. Okay, that's why unions are not quite as strong in a lot of sectors now, because really what's stronger is getting public opinion on your side. You want a company to change something they're doing, get out there, change the social media, do those types of things, really impact their buying decisions, that gets their attention a lot quicker than a labor union does. Labor unions now, you just have to kind of really, which is exactly what happened with Amazon. Okay, those are workers that were impacted in those areas. But what did they do? They took to social media, they took pictures, they struck outside, they live streamed, they did all this type of stuff to get this generated, this impact against Amazon to force them to make those changes. Okay, which is what they did. They did actually make, they're now spending $4 billion to upgrade their facilities on and to make them kind of COVID compliant, if you want to look at that. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at something that's kind of similar, but a little along the same lines, is ethics. Anybody heard the term ethics? Okay, so what is ethics? What's that? Okay, morals is definitely an aspect of ethics. Okay. What else would you say ethics is? The aspect of right and wrong. Okay. And we'll, for those of you, you guys in business will definitely end up probably taking business ethics, which will definitely cover that. And we take the entire term to evaluate that aspect of ethics and what's right and wrong and all those types of things. But in this general sense, does a business have a responsibility to act ethically? Okay, I see one shaking their head. Okay, do they have a responsibility to act ethically? This should be a pretty much a yes or no question for me. It's yeah. So yes, they have a responsibility to act ethically. Do they? Not always, right? I mean, there's even in the last 20. Okay, for any of you guys that are in business, will be hearing probably this act called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Okay, it's about 2,000 pages of legislation that came through in the early 2000s. Okay, changed the entire way a business operates basically forever. But it's like it's definitely would fill a 6-inch binder plus some as far as the law itself. But it changed the way businesses operate. That was based on ethical issues in probably about 4 companies. Okay, the biggest one being Enron. Anybody in here hear about Enron? Okay, Enron was an energy conglomerate in Texas, and it grew fairly large in the late, basically 90s, probably in the late 80s, early 90s. Okay. The problem what they were doing to manipulate stock prices was they basically cooked their books and did this, what they call the professional shell game. Okay, they basically set up their closing period of the books to occur on different months. So each company they had, one was due, in March, the next one was due in May, the next one was in July when they closed their books. And what they would do is move money between each of their companies to make them look very profitable when the financial statements came out. Okay, what does that do for the stock price? Yeah, absolutely. It made the stock price go up. Guess who made all the money? People at the top had all these stock options. Okay, well, one day the house of cards came falling down pretty hard. And basically what it did is they found out that there was no money in people's retirement accounts. They literally overnight just totally shuttered that company, okay? Because they found out basically the companies were broke, okay? Oversimplification maybe, but this is kind of the so obviously those guys at the top were not acting in an ethical manner, were they? Okay, you don't play the shell game, okay, with billions and billions of dollars. There's also instances of Tyco was another one where the CEO spent $1.5 million on a birthday party for his wife with company money off of the coast of Italy. Okay, There were several of those in that time frame that ended up going to Sarbanes-Oxley, which basically changes the way corporate reporting is done. Has to be much more transparent and those types of things. Again, because businesses don't always act in that ethical sense. Also, about that same time frame, we had these aspects that come out, which is called. We actually came out with what you call the Code of Ethics. Okay, I don't know, anybody in your work? Okay, work at a part-time job somewhere? I almost guarantee that somewhere along the way in the way you were, and I don't care whether it's McDonald's or any of those, probably ended up having either a code of conduct or a code of ethics policy. Okay, that came in with all those papers you signed at the beginning when you got hired. Okay, there's not a company out there now that doesn't have one there. Okay. Why do they want to do that? What's important about issuing a code of ethics or a code of conduct? Okay, definitely protect your customers. I would say to a degree it protects your employees. Okay, but ultimately, what does it do? Protects the business. Okay, the employee. It's a clear communication. Somebody mentioned communication earlier as part of CSR, which is true. It's a clear communication to both the customers and the customers, the workers, your employees, and everybody in the company of what is expected from them to be an employee there. Okay. Depending on how you want to look at it, some people will say, it's a way to make sure you get fired. Well, not if you follow the policy, but it's really a good, clear expectations of what is expected of you as an employee. Okay, that way you can't say, well, I didn't know. Okay, that's always the big one, well, I didn't know. I can't tell you the number of employees that told me that. Well, I'm like, no, you did know, you just may not have remembered, but you were definitely told that. Okay, I use Starbucks here because theirs is probably pretty intense. Okay, they have an entire website devoted to their code of ethics. Okay, or a part of the website. Okay, standards of business conduct. Okay, so this is their way of ensuring that everybody around them, including the people they do business with, is acting in an ethical way. Okay? So if you're looking at, business practices, okay, this talks about how in this particular one, conflicts of interest, okay? Their part of this goes right into all the way through their securities, okay, how they treat one another, okay. And this applies to their vendors as well, okay. So it's not just what people say. It's not just our simple little, just not as simple as everybody who works for them, but it's also everybody they do business with. Because again, it goes back to that core mission of what they're looking for. Okay, so what I'm going to look at now is we're going to look at this video from Theo Chocolate, okay, it's about 5 minutes long, okay, and what we're going to do is as you go through there, I want you guys to take a look at the last, you're going to look at these questions, okay, because we're going to discuss them afterwards. Okay, so this is at the end of chapter 5. Okay, it's the video case on corporate social responsibility. There's 3 questions here. Okay, the first one is what are the practices that reflect on the concept of sustainability? What does the vice president mean when she says a triple bottom line of the company? Okay, which is an interesting concept that's really kind of isolated to this company, although Starbucks kind of has one as well and along those lines. And what does it mean to be fair trade leader? What happens to fair trade goals conflict with some other responsibility to be profitable, which is a good point. In other words, what happens when that CSR policy, and sometimes it happens, and Starbucks is one of those that's really struggled with that. is where their corporate responsibility policy intersects with profitability. Okay, especially now, right? Okay, if you watch Starbucks, their sales, like any other restaurant, is down probably about 30%, which is pretty good considering that some are even greater than that. But their sales right now globally are down roughly 30%. Okay, do you think that puts a strain on their CSR policy? Okay, yeah, I mean, do you think that how are you going to struggle to make it on 30% less sales? So if you guys are working and they cut your income by 30%, what does that do? Change your lifestyle, okay? Okay, you're going to have to give up something, right? Okay, where do a lot of people cut their corners? If you took 30% pay cut right now, what would you do? What would you do? Find a new job, okay? What if that job's not coming anytime soon? And you're going to have to live off that 30% less. What do you do? Okay? What would you do? Okay, cut out eating out. Okay? What's another example of what you would do?
Probably cut off like that. Figure out how to ration grocery shopping.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Point is, the same thing's going to happen in business. Okay? You lose 30% of your revenue, you're going to have to do something. And when you're in a company like Starbucks, where you're really heavily invested in this CSR policy, okay, do you think, how about this opinion? Do you think it's going to be as important to their customers now about that CSR policy? Okay, in our economic times right now, do you see that being as important as it was a year ago? Okay, well, I got one no. Okay, what do you guys think? Do you think it's as important as it was a year ago? They lose the revenue, right? So do you think their customer base is ingrained in what their corporate social responsibility is, as it was a year ago? Okay, I'd say probably not as much. Starbucks is a little hard example to do that because they are so heavily invested in it. And the societal impact now, obviously, there's a huge awareness on the way a company reacts to the socialism, to the social aspects of society. But I would say, hazard a guess, that there's a percentage of their customers that aren't really, they're more concerned about what that price of that cup of coffee is going to be, and if it's going to be more than it was this week than it was last week. Okay, I would suspect. Okay, as much as Starbucks has a lot of brand loyalty. Okay, so the other aspect of this that I'm going to ask you is there's a fourth question over here on the side. Okay, that you guys will have to answer for this in-class discussion. That is not on there. Okay. And I want you to, after we look at the video, I'm looking at how does Theo's, okay, how do all these relate in the case of Theo, okay? So how does the policies of fair trade, the corporate social responsibility, ethics, and their mission statement, how are they all intertwined, okay? Because Theo's chocolate is kind of, it's a good example because it's very similar to Starbucks, okay? Where as we go through the video, you'll see that there is that corporate social responsibility guides a lot of what they do. So as we look at that video, you're going to see that there's a lot of similarities between this particular chocolate company and that. So for this part of this, what we're going to do is we're going to watch the video for about 6 minutes long or so, and then we'll get into a little discussion on the questions.
I fell in love with chocolate originally as a kid. I loved Halloween candy. But up until I was a young adult, I didn't know where chocolate came from. And so I volunteered as a conservation volunteer working with Kekchi and Milton, my indigenous cocoa farmers. And there were howler monkeys, and we had this whole adventure in the rainforest. My curiosity was off the hook. I'm Joe, founder and CEO of Theo Chocolate.
I'm Deborah, Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Theo Chocolate. My entire life, I've been a daily chocolate eater, but I think it really wasn't until I got to know Joe that I started to understand the depths of the story of chocolate and all of the social and environmental issues surrounding chocolate. I think it has special powers.
After my experience in Central America, I saw that social and environmental degradation were really business problems, and I wanted to help save the world by making chocolate. And I got into the cocoa industry, importing cocoa beans, and then working with manufacturers to make chocolate. And we were doing organic chocolate here in the United States and in Europe. But after doing that for several years, I saw that it was most important to control the brand and the message, control the manufacturing from the bean all the way to the finished product, and the supply chain. Because if I could build a vertically integrated business, I had the best opportunity to affect every part of the business and really create lasting change. There were no other companies producing organic fair trade chocolate because the barriers to entry are so high in this industry. If you wanted to go into the coffee business, all you need to do is buy a roaster and put it in your garage and you're done. Chocolate is a very complicated product to make. So the majority of chocolate is made by only about 12 companies in the whole country. And they're doing such large volume that they control not only the manufacturing, but distribution, and they have extreme leverage on the producers. We're really interested and care deeply about where all of our ingredients come from. Our business ethic is informed by our belief that all life on the planet is interconnected, that we need consumers to be healthy and well, our farmers to be healthy and well, and the entire planet to be healthy and well in order for us to be successful and profitable. Fair trade certification is important for us to build trust with our consumers that we do what we say we're going to do. And we choose IMO Fair for Life as our certification for fair trade. What's great about Fair for Life is that it is a certification that ensures the economic and social integrity of our entire supply chain, from the cocoa farmers that we work with all the way through to our own factory operations. I don't consider myself a whistleblower as much as, well, the industry considers me a nuisance. What really we're doing is trying to give an alternative to practices that have contributed to social, economic, and environmental degradation. The average cocoa farmer earns less than $1 a day for their entire family, and they have very little options in cocoa growing regions to sell other cash crops. And as a result, they're beholden to an industry that is very oppressive. The cocoa price has been so low compared to the costs of their production that in West Africa, cocoa farmers have had to resort to slavery. One of the benefits of fair trade for cocoa farmers is that it's a transparent negotiating system that allows the farmers to improve the quality, which in turn delivers a much better price to them on the farm. So we see this as a truly holistic approach to not only the products that we make or accessing certain kinds of customers, but really be creating a profitable business model that is having a beneficial impact on us and the planet.
Theo for me is an example of what Joe and I envision as enlightened capitalism. We're the only organic fair trade certified bean to bar chocolate factory in the United States, which is pretty exciting. So I like to say that we're trying to define the intersection of artisan world-class chocolate making with sustainable practices. I like to say it's doing good while doing well. And so what that means is that we see ourselves as a triple bottom line company, which means we value people, the planet, and profit in equal measure. And none of those things suffer at the expense of something else. One of the most important steps that we've taken to hold ourselves accountable in terms of the way that we treat our own employees is we recently underwent IMO certification for our own factory. So what that means is that we hold ourselves accountable to the same fair trade standards that are that our farmers undergo. So we're subject to the same kind of scrutiny. But the reason that's so important to us is because we're very committed to transparency at every level of our supply chain. And so if we don't fulfill our own and embody our own values here within the company, within our own relationships with our own employees, then it's really meaningless. So, and that's an ongoing challenge for us. By far the most exciting thing about Theo as we grow is that we've really begun to be a voice for change. As we've developed a really loyal following for our products and the story and the work that we're doing in the developing world, it's given us a certain amount of credibility in terms of what we think is necessary for change and finding platforms to share that with people in really meaningful ways. For me, that's really, really exciting.
Taking a look at these questions. We'll go to the last one first. So what is meant by fair trade? What's fair trade?
Probably how they get their products, some that they're trying to say is fair trade between the farmers and themselves.
Okay.
And the standards, that is how they're trying to.
That's close. That's kind of what they're trying to achieve. Okay. That if they're plants in the U.S. Okay. So the U.S. has a whole lot of different standards. Okay. Than they would if that plant was in West Africa. Okay. But what else are they saying there? What else are they trying to say by fair trade? Do you think that a lot of those other producers care what the wages are that they're paying the farmer for their product? Do you think that's an importance to them? It is to a couple of companies, yeah, but it's not. There is a couple of companies that are in Europe that are also doing this, but no, overall, the industry itself does not care. Okay, what is their goal? What is that typically? What is their goal? What's the goal of any business? Okay, they're going to make profit, right? How do you make profit? Okay, I wouldn't say necessarily cutting costs, but maintaining a cost structure, whatever that cost structure is, and then selling your product as high as it possibly the market will bear. Okay, that's how you make profit. Okay, so if they really don't care what do those companies want to do, they're not really caring what those other companies are. What are they doing? They're looking to control their costs. So one of those ways to do it is buy the cheaper product coming in, right? Drive down that cost. But what happens to a farmer when they can't? When they can't make ends meet? Will they continue to farm? No, they can't, right? There's no way they can continue to farm. So, because it's the same story we're encountering in the U.S. right now, okay? Because of the particular economic downturn, okay? Farmers are probably at the high end of that struggle because they've already invested their money in their products for this year, okay? And with a decreased demand that is out there right now, and it's a huge decrease in demand, those products are going by the wayside, okay? So you reach a point where farmers cannot maintain what they're doing. So the aspect of fair trade is, okay, we're going to pay you a fair wage. We're going to pay a fair price for your product, okay? And we're going to follow that all the way through our supply chain, okay? Much like Starbucks does, okay? Starbucks will buy all over the world, coffee all over the world, and there's a reason why it's always dark and bitter, because they over roast it, because it doesn't matter what part of the world they buy it in. Now, when they do buy it, though, they do buy it under fair trade constraints, okay, which means they're paying at least enough for that coffee to make sure that that person's making a living in it, okay? That's kind of what fair trade says. Everybody through the process will be able to make what they need to be able to sustain the business, okay? So that aspect of fair trade, so what do you think it means to those leaders at Theo? Is fair trade important to them? Oh, definitely, right? I mean, they're to the point where they put their U.S. plant through the fair trade, the fair trade International Fair Trade Organization, the IMO, okay? Which means that everything they're subjecting their own process in the plant in the U.S., which is probably even one step more than Starbucks does, okay? Starbucks does not go through that with their roasters, okay, and their facilities there. They do manage their supply chain coming in, but they have not put their U.S. facilities through that fair trade, because that's a huge undertaking to ensure that you're fair trade all the way through to your consumer. Okay, so it's definitely something that they're considered to be at the key part of that. So what do you think happens if those fair trade goals interferes with the profit aspect? This is the ethical question. What happens if those come into conflict? You've said now that you're going to adhere to all these fair trade standards, and now, given you've got, in my previous example, they've got a 30% cut in sales, okay, or 30% cut in revenue. That's going to put a strain on profit, right? Okay, I guarantee it's going to put a strain on profit in this one because a lot of their product when they started this was probably already in production, so they have it, and it has a shelf life, okay, which means it won't be any good. Their product will, unlike a pair of shoes, it may go out of style, but they're not really going to be, unless you're wearing them, what happens to a pair of shoes on the shelf? Can it sit there for a year? Typically, shoes, yeah, you could. Oh, no, shoes. Yeah, if you're looking at shoes, they can probably stay on the shelf a year, right? Okay. You know, retailers, other than to change the seasons and those seasonality and some other aspects of it, realistically, the t-shirts we're buying, they can probably sit on the shelf for 2 years. Realistically, right? Nothing's really going to happen to that article of clothing. Chocolate definitely is going to have that constraint because basically after about 6 to 8 months after production, it starts to lose flavor, especially made under these constraints, okay? Because there's no preservatives added to their chocolates, okay? It's an all-natural product. So being an all-natural product, there's no stabilizers in it, there's no nothing in it. So after about 6 to 8 months, it's going to deteriorate somewhat, okay? It's not going to be the same quality as it was before. So what do you think is going to happen? What do you think would happen? There's not a right or wrong answer, okay? And I don't know what they've done. I didn't actually look to see how they've handled it, but when those two things combine, what do you think is going to happen? Or what potentially could happen? What are your options? What are your options? You're in business and you encounter this, what would you do? Continue going as you were? How many people would say, yeah, let's keep going the way we're going? I hope it gets better. Okay. How many people say they would have to make a change of somewhere in the business? Okay. 3, 4. Okay. Yeah, somewhere they're going to have to change. Okay. Now, depending on how strong, in this case, the ethics are pretty strong, right? In this company, they're pretty set on what they're doing, what their mindset is, right? So if their mindset's pretty strong, what are they? They're probably going to try to hold the line as close as they can throughout this whole process. Okay. Now they might do things like reducing people, or they might, close down plants. They might close down stores. Okay. There's a lot of options that they could do. Okay. But so if you have the option of being able to, if you have the option to be able to continue on business, then you're going to try to, in this case, fair trade is probably going to be very important to them. Okay, so they're going to try to maintain that ethical standard. What would some less ethical options, do you think? I can name you a few. Adding different things to their products to make them last longer. adding additives to their products, changing their product line, okay? Sliding some additives in there that'll extend out the chocolate so it's not quite as, making changes to their product, make a cheaper product, bring in cheaper raw materials, go back to the open market and not adhere to their fair trade standards of bringing the right product in. There's a lot of options as a business person that you could go through to make this happen. The point is, where is your ethics or your morals in this case? And that's really what it boils down to. All right, so for the in-class discussion, guys, you need to answer those questions, plus this extra one. Okay, this is not in the book. Okay, so you're going to need to make sure that you answer that question as well. I want to know how those are actually interacting with the rest of it.
Questions that we have. So we have.
Discussions 1 through 3.
Yeah, that was the fourth question.
The fourth question right here. I'll just move the. Yeah. Oh, wait, you can see it. There you go. You'll be able to see a little bit better. And that fourth question is, how does Theo's policies of fair trade, CSR, ethics, and mission statement all interrelate? Okay? So how do those, in this case, do they interrelate to what they're doing? All right, so that's it, guys. Once you get that copy down, we'll see everybody on Monday. By Monday, we should be after full class. We'll be with you.